When I was 13, my family decided to head to the beach for a short trip. While we were there, we decided to eat some lunch at a buffet in the area. We all sit down, grab our plates, and start happily eating. However, halfway through, I noticed my dad has suddenly become very tense. He suddenly went from all smiles to full poker face, and I could tell that something was seriously wrong. He then speaks to us in Korean. I want everyone to listen very closely. There have been some people watching us since we got here, and they haven't looked away since. Don't turn around to check. When the table next to us finishes eating, we'll leave with them. Now the group next to us was huge, a group of about 12 people or so, and so we continued to eat while painfully waiting for them to finish as well. When they were done, we stood up after them to leave. While doing so, I couldn't help but steal a glance around myself, and that's when I saw them. In the farthest corner of the restaurant, there were 4 people glaring at us. The 3 males were covered in tattoos and wore ragged clothing that displayed their muscles. The female looked downright insane. She was extremely thin and had messy red hair and tattoos from the neck down. They were seriously giving off some bad vibes. As we were leaving, we noticed them suddenly stand up to leave as well. At this point, my mom started to panic, but my dad managed to calm her down, thankfully. I think that they saw my mom lose it though, because the female had this twisted smile on her face that sent chills down my spine. So we get into our car and begin driving away. That's when we realize that we're now being followed. The group from the restaurant was trailing us from behind while switching lanes to try and remain hidden. At this point, there was no way we could just go back to our hotel. My dad decided to keep driving while staying in the most populated areas. They tailed us for almost an entire hour before suddenly making a U-turn and driving away. Even after this, my dad kept driving around for another 30 minutes or so, just in case they tried to fake us out or something. The whole experience was just incredibly unnerving. This happened around 5 years ago when I was in college. I was staying in a women's PG. My friend and I were sharing a room. After a rather tiring day at college, we decided to hit the bed early. It was mid-September, and it was quite cold in Bangalore, so we didn't even use the fan. It was extremely quiet, and so we were in deep sleep quite quickly. All of a sudden, though, I really don't know what made me do this. I woke up with a start at around 1 a.m. I looked to my side and saw a figure standing next to my bed, looking at me. The first few seconds were all hazy, as I was trying to comprehend just what was happening and who the hell that was. At first, I thought it was my roommate. Then I theorized it was my PG owner. But soon enough, I realized it was a complete stranger. It was dark. Our bedroom was slightly ajar, and there was a ray of light coming from there. From that light, I could make out this man was wearing a white shirt, and he was holding something in his hand. He was drunk and stinking of alcohol. I screamed. Because there was so much fear inside of me, my voice barely escaped my lips. It was hoarse and deep, and just didn't sound like me at all. I kept repeatedly screaming, "Get out! Get out!" He just stood there, staring at me. He raised his hand with whatever he was holding and whispered to me, "I have a knife. I will kill you." I later came to know he was holding my favorite blue scissors, which he had picked up from our table. We found it the next day outside our room on the windowsill. My roommate woke up hearing me. Thank God she was there. Now the guy was standing between her and I. He asked me to shift and sit on her bed. Once I jumped over and sat next to her, I felt a lot more courageous. Meanwhile, my friend took out her phone to call my other friend in the next PG room to get help. When the guy saw the light from the screen, he demanded she hand it over. Little backstory. My roommate's phone has been confiscated that very week in college, and after a lot of effort, she had just received it back. She was very, very protective of it. So with all that anger piled up inside her, when he asked her to hand over her phone, she lost it. She grabbed her nearby Wolverine water bottle and smacked him over the head. A sudden surge of bravery came over me, and I pulled him by his belt. We screamed at him, using all sorts of swear words. His threats decreased at this point. Realizing he was outnumbered and getting the shit kicked out of him, he walked out, locked us inside the room, and from the window again said, "I will kill you," and he left. Oh God, that's it. I couldn't sleep for months. I was entirely paranoid. The scary part is, the next day, we found out that just 3 days previously, a man had broken into a room on the 3rd floor of our own PG and molested a girl. I can't even explain how creeped out we were. I couldn't look at men wearing white for days. I panicked any time I smelled alcohol. The next day, 6 of my PG friends slept in the same room, armed with weapons to attack any intruder. And yes, we did go to the police. And no, they didn't help us one single bit. We requested them to guard that area until proper railings were built, because anyone could just jump over, but they joked and asked us to take turns and stand guard. Of course, when called to the High Commissioner later, the same policemen were there in RPG apologizing the very next morning. That same year in December, a similar incident happened in another PG near ours, where girls were asked to hand over laptops and gold, and on not doing so, were threatened to be raped. Those guys were caught with CCTV footage. We still don't know if it was the same man, but after 3 months, I finally slept peacefully. Even today, though, I stay on the 9th floor, and yet still have to make sure all my windows and doors are tightly shut before ever sleeping. We were on vacation in Cozumel, Mexico. My wife and I were at Choncanab, a beach park where you can swim with the dolphins, snorkel, scuba dive, or just relax on the beach. We wanted to be away from the crowd somewhat, so we walked down the beach and found some chairs and a shade umbrella where there weren't many people around. After relaxing for a little while, we decided it would be a good idea to go snorkeling. The area we were in was kind of on a small cliff, so there were stairs to get down into the water. We began snorkeling as soon as we got in, but without realizing it, the currents were slowly pushing us away from shore. When we finally looked up, we were shocked at just how far away we were. I wasn't worried at this point though, just surprised that we drifted so far without knowing it. My wife and I are both pretty strong swimmers, but by that point in my life, swimming meant standing in the pool in chest-deep water in the backyard and throwing my daughter over my shoulders until I was worn out. This was far different. I'd suggested we start swimming back, thinking we could just snorkel our way back to shore, but after a few minutes, I noticed not only were we not getting anywhere, we were getting even further away than before. Our situation rapidly became dangerous. To make any headway, we would need to swim as hard as we could. If we stopped to rest, we'd get pushed right back out. Having gone so far down the beach looking for a quiet spot, there was absolutely no one around. Nobody could hear or see us, even if we shouted for help. I told my wife we needed to bear down and swim as hard as we could. I put everything I had into getting back to shore. I was making some progress, and finally got close enough that I felt like we were going to be able to make it. Suddenly I heard my wife's cries for help from behind me. She had gotten tired and fallen behind. She was struggling to keep her head above water now, and I was becoming extremely scared. I was about 25 yards from shore, and she was about 50 to 70 yards behind me. I knew that helping a tired swimmer was tricky and dangerous, especially if they were to panic. I was tired myself, so although I didn't hesitate to go back and get her, I was constantly thinking to myself, we are in some deep shit. I got to my wife, and although I tried to remain as positive as possible, I still lit a fire under her ass at the same time. My main thoughts at this point were of our daughter. She was only about 2 years old, and I'd made up my mind that she was not going to lose her parents that day. I was out of breath, out of strength, and out of options well before we got to the base of the cliff. I just tried to continually think of our daughter. Finally, somehow, we made it. We were still in deep water though, and had to work our way around the shoreline to get to the stairs, but the hardest part was over. I've thought about this many times. We both could have very easily died. I wondered how long it would have been before anyone realized something had happened to us. It probably would have been long after the end of our trip, when we didn't arrive home. We probably would have never been found. It's a scary thought, how quickly that situation worsened, but I'm grateful we managed to make it through in the end. I moved to Brazil a few years ago and ended up living on a beachfront in a small town outside of Rio. It's a beautiful and quiet sandy beach, and I try to take full advantage of living in its proximity, often starting off my day with a beachfront cup of coffee. My favorite daily activity by far is a couple hours barefoot walk or run on the beach every night while listening to my iPod, accompanied by my dogs. At night, I have the entire beach almost to myself with nary a soul encountered, except the occasional fisherman or romantic couple making out on the sand under the starlit skies. The serenity of that solitude, the surrounding quiet, interrupted only by the sounds of the waves, some nights crashing and frothing, other nights gently lapping my feet when walking on the water's edge, was an exquisite feeling. The feeling of wet sand on my toes, sometimes bioluminescent, faintly glowing and sparkling, glittering with every footstep. That to me is bliss, and one of life's simple joys that I just cannot adequately describe at all. What I'm saying is this: it's my comfort zone, and the last place I'd expect anything unpleasant, let alone frightening, to happen. Until one night about a year ago. One minute, I was walking on the beach at the water's edge on firm sand, all relaxed and chill, listening to an interesting audiobook. The next moment, I hit a soggy and crumbly patch. My feet started sinking ankle deep. Foolishly, I kept walking. I'd been through many a patch like that before, and it never got deeper than a few inches above my ankles. Overcoming the suction and resistance of patches like that had been, until that night, just something that added a bit more of a challenge and workout to my walk or run. It was actually kind of fun, and so was it that evening as well, until the ground beneath me suddenly gave way, and I immediately dropped in knee-deep. I started slowly sinking, knee-deep, then thigh-deep, up to my butt, waist-deep in a gripping mix of sand and water that imprisoned my legs and kept dragging me deeper down. Yeah, I'd managed to get myself caught in quicksand. My heart had never beat so fast, strong, or loud as it did in the next few seconds of that night, as my mind registered that this was actually quicksand, like the kind you see in the movies, but in real life, in my real life, and unlike the movies, there was not a conveniently placed vine in sight. So there I was, heart beating like a tom-tom and nearly bursting, gradually sinking deeper and on the edge of panic, alone at night on a beach with nobody near. My dogs were whimpering at the edge of the dangerous sand. Smarter than me, they'd never followed me into those soggy patches, but always walked around them. They were probably aware that their owner was about to be a goner. My mouth was too dry, and my lungs hyperventilating, unwilling to properly fill for a scream for help. The only sound I could manage was something like a panicked glork. The closest houses were a couple 100 yards away, and probably empty as well anyway, since it was deep in the winter and many owners only occupied them during the summer. A jumble of discordant thoughts rapidly flashed through my mind. I always knew I'd have a weird death. Don't let my iPod get wet. They don't make those anymore. I need to pee. I was navel deep when I remembered something I'd seen on Mythbusters that dealt with quicksand. Something about lying down and spreading one's body weight. So that's what I did. And damn if it didn't work. Instantaneously, just like that. As soon as I tried it, I stopped sinking. I found myself being able to slowly crawl and slither until I got to firm ground. I crawled for a few yards on dry sand, then shakily got to my feet. Looking back at the quicksand patch, other than discoloration in the spot where I'd struggled for my life and the path of my slithering back to safety, it was indistinguishable and looked no different in any way from any other stretch of smooth, packed sand near the water's edge. The whole thing was probably less than 2 minutes from start to finish, but that was the most intense and frightening few minutes of my entire life. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide to subscribe, make sure you hit that bell button and turn on all notifications so you can be notified of every video that I post. I tend to post a video every day when I can anyway though, so you can just come check back time to time if you don't feel like it. If you guys have any criticisms about this video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I am always looking for new ways to improve the channel. If you guys would like to send in your own story or suggest a story for me to read, please be sure to check in the description below the video. You will find links to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I will try to get back to you about your story as soon as possible. If you do decide to send a story in, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in, and what type of story it is if it has one. Please be sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to include proper grammar if you can. Last but not least, as well, I have 2 other channels that I also run, called Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour. I do true crime videos and disaster documentaries on them respectively, so if you're interested in either of those, feel free to check them out if you feel so inclined. Who knows, you might just like them. Overall though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now. Not too much to update you on in this outro, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.